Welcome to this video presentation of NATO Joint Logistic Support Group. After this presentation, you should be able to explain the role and responsibility to the Joint Logistic Support Group, summarize the command and cooperation structure of the logistic elements within the Joint Task Force, explain and use of the Joint Logistic Support Group. NATO defines the Joint Logistic Support Group as a joint force-generated deployable logistic capability that provides command and control of assigned logistic forces from the theater to the tactical level in the support of a joint task force. Joint Logistic Support Group is made up by the NATO members, partners, and non-NATO members. Ultimately, the size and composition of the Joint Logistic Support Group in any operations is determined by the overall size of the joint task force it supports, planned during the operation planning process. Joint Logistic Support Group supports the component commands by providing common services and support to meet their requirements using a combination of its assigned forces, host nation support, and contracts. In addition, the Joint Logistic Support Group is capable of supporting deployment, operation-level sustainment, and redeployment of forces. The Joint Logistic Support Group headquarter core staff element provides the nucleus of the Joint Logistic Support Group headquarter and consists of personnel organic to the headquarters providing the Joint Task Force headquarter. The Joint Logistic Support Group headquarters core staff element supports operational planning, provides personnel to the operation liaison and reconnaissance team, and planning for the execution of the theater-level multinational logistic support. The manning and tasks for the core staff element is described in the Allied Logistic Publication 4-6-1. Joint Logistic Support Group Headquarters Argumentees. The Joint Logistic Support Group Headquarters core staff element, which typically be augmented by additional personnel to be enable the Joint Logistic Support Group Headquarters to execute theater-level multinational logistic support. The Joint Logistic Support Group Headquarters will be tailored for each specific NATO mission. Joint Logistic Support Group units. The Joint Logistic Support Group will be assigned national units, host nation units, and/or commercial entities, and to enable it to execute theater-level multinational logistic support. These units or entities will be identified during the operational planning process and be assigned during the force generation process. It is essential that the Joint Logistic Support Group has all the necessary logistic capabilities that are operational required. We will not go any deeper into the Joint Logistic Support Group headquarter organization. A generic table of organization of the Joint Logistic Support Group has been presented in the pre-study package. For more details, please study the Allied Logistic Publication 4-6-1. For the last several years, NATO has had a challenge with recruitment and retention of the manning of Joint Logistic Support Group structure included permanent argumentees. The last year's increase with the new logistic unit Joint Support and Enabling Command in Ulm, Germany, has placed an even stronger pressure on the logistic personnel assigned to NATO. Even if the Joint Logistic Support Group not yet has been used in a NATO operation, the intention, the tasks, and the organization are fully implemented. The standing Joint Logistic Support Group, which is a part of the NATO command structure, is co-located with the Joint Support and Enabling Command in Ulm, Germany. We will look into the standing Joint Logistic Support Group in the following slide. Currently, there are 2 tactical Joint Logistic Support Groups, which are at the NATO Joint Force Command headquarters in Brønsum, the Netherlands, and the NATO Joint Force Command headquarters in Naples, Italy. They are each composed of a core staff element up to 80 personnel. The staff is augmented by approximately 40 additional personnel when activated, as described in the previous slide. It is clear that the actual structure and composition of a tactical Joint Logistic Support Group headquarters will differ from operation to operation, and its success is largely dependent on it having the manning, expertise, and the subordinated units to execute its mission. Joint Force Command NODEFIC in USA has tasked Norway to develop plans and a structure for a Joint Logistic Support Group. Currently, the plan is that Norway will provide the core staff element, included a liaison officer, to the Joint Force Command NODEFIC headquarters. Furthermore, that this Joint Logistic Support Group headquarters will be located in Norway. The Joint Support Enabling Command is a permanent joint entity, operates within Supreme Allied Command Europe's area to provide NATO with security to ensure freedom of movement and sustainment for the operations and missions. The standing Joint Logistic Support Group is a permanent joint logistic entity which enables the responsive strategic and operation level deployment, movement, and employment of NATO forces. The standing Joint Logistic Support Group plans and coordinates activities for the provision of 360-degree logistic support across Supreme Allied Command Europe's area of responsibility. It will provide continuous operational level support and coordination to the logistic components in all Allied Command Operations headquarters within the scope of the NATO level of ambition. It will provide logistic expertise related to advanced logistic planning and the preparation of NATO's ongoing and new operations. The main responsibility of the standing Joint Logistic Support Group are, during the operational planning process, identify logistical shortfalls or surpluses and coordinate and establish theater-level logistic support solutions at the joint operation level. Conduct operational movement planning and coordinate national deployment plans, as well as develop and control the execution of the multinational detailed deployment plan. Provide logistic functional command and control over theater-level logistic force elements in order to facilitate coherent preparation, deployment, and sustainment of NATO forces in coordination with the troop contributing nations or host nation, and when appropriate, transfer respective mission and tasks to activated Joint Logistic Support Groups headquarters and its nodes. The standing Joint Logistic Support Group coordinate and oversee strategic deployment and logistics, while the Joint Logistic Support Group execute the RSOM process, reception, staging, and onward movement, and of course the third line logistic during the sustainment phase. The standing Joint Logistic Support Group is responsible for the execution of the joint logistic in support of the NATO High Readiness Force, included the Very High Readiness Joint Task Force, until the Joint Force Command in Brønsum or the Joint Force Command in Naples are ready to take this responsibility. The standing Joint Logistic Support Group sees themselves as the link between the strategic and the tactical level, as they will affect all three levels, especially between the Supreme Headquarters Allied Powers Europe and the other Joint Force Commands. Standing Joint Logistic Support Group will also be able to prioritize between the various joint operations areas. The Joint Logistic Support Network has been presented in the pre-study package. A Joint Logistic Support Network is a system of interconnecting logistic nodes, activities, organizations, and sites, and their multimodal links in the joint operation area. It is important to emphasize that the Commander Joint Logistic Support Group is not a battle space owner. This is a network of logistic nodes, and the battle space commander will usually have command and control over units passing through his area. The Joint Logistic Architecture contains the sending nation's logistic tasks, the Joint Logistic Support Network, and the tactical logistic units in the component commands organization. It describes the total logistic supply chain, included the logistic support level. The Joint Logistic Support Group's headquarters will normally be co-located with the Theater Logistic Base. Theater Logistic Base is responsible for the third line logistic support and the transportation of all logistic forwards to the second line. Joint Logistic Support Group coordinate with the host nation support and the national support elements for the third line logistic support. Joint Logistic Support Group also coordinate the contracts and communication with civilian contractors, contractor support operations. The Theater Logistic Base is the main supply assets for the third line logistic support belonging to the Joint Logistic Support Group. Most of the Joint Logistic Support Group's units will be physically grouped together in the Theater Logistic Base, including the co-location of the national support elements and civilian contractors. The slide shows a generic layout of the Theater Logistic Base. Theater Logistic Base units consist of logistic units that are able to receive, store, and deliver all classes of supply, included the transportation of these classes within the area of operation. Force protection units, medical facilities, and combat service support units for the first line and the second line of support for all units within the Theater Logistic Base. The determination of the location of the Theater Logistic Base is decided during the operation planning process and must be coordinated with the land components combat service support area, the air components deployed operating base, and the special operation forces bases. The supplies to the maritime component forward logistic sites and the air components deployed operating bases outside the joint operation area will be delivered directly without passing through the Theater Logistic Base inside the joint operation area. Similar with the supplies from the different national support elements. While the deployed operation bases often supports only one contributing nation's aircrafts, the forward logistic sites supports several contributing nations' vessels. In this setting, Joint Logistic Support Group may be tasked to be responsible for the forward logistic site. Joint Force Command, together with the NATO member states' forces, generates a joint task force for the operation, included the Strategic Logistic Plan. The Joint Task Force headquarters executes operational control over all the component commands and the Joint Logistic Support Group. Joint Logistic Support Group is equated with the other component commands and operate at the tactical level. However, Joint Logistic Support Group will also operate on the operational level during the reception, staging, and on-want movement. some phase. Underneath the component command's headquarters, you will find those tactical level logistic units which are required for the organic support of the component command's operations. Special Operations Component Command is usually self-sufficient and relying on a land component command's support for larger tactical operations if required. Over these tactical levels logistic units, the relevant component command executes operational control. Additionally, you see the green dotted line which indicate the logistic coordination which is conducted by the Joint Logistic Support Group between itself and the different component commands in order to organize theater-level logistic and medical support. Here you see the tactical level units which are subject to Joint Logistic Support Group's operational control. These units have the task to provide theater logistics and medical support for the component commands and to conduct the ARSAM process for the entire NATO force. Finally, the purple line shows the logistic control, the LOGCON. The Joint Logistic Support Groups executes over host nation support and national support elements in order to synchronize and coordinate their national theater-wide support functions. This slide is a generic example how the deployment of a Joint Logistic Support Group headquarters could theoretically look like with earlier deployment timelines in comparison to the Joint Task Force. The North Atlantic Council's initiating directive will start the process, leading to an activation pre-deployment, ACTPRED, and an activation order, ACTORD, by Supreme Allied Commander Europe as trigger for their deployment. Joint Logistic Support Group headquarters will gradually deploy to reach full operational capability prior to the Joint Task Force. The Joint Logistic Support Headquarters will deploy subject matter experts to support the Joint Task Force operational, liaison and reconnaissance team and, when necessary, deploy a Joint Logistic Reconnaissance team. The Joint Logistic Support Group Headquarters core staff element will provide personnel to the operational liaison and reconnaissance team and the Joint Logistic Reconnaissance team to gather information to support the operational planning process and development of the Commander of Joint Logistic Support Group's operational plan. The remaining of the Joint Logistic Support Group headquarters staff, including argumentees, will deploy short after the operational liaison and reconnaissance team and the Joint Logistic Reconnaissance team in order to coordinate support with the host nation and other actors in the theater, as well as to establish the conditions for the ARSAM process, reception, staging, and onward movement, and the initial logistic support. The rest of the Joint Logistic Support Group headquarters and subordinated units will deploy prior to the Joint Task Force deployment in order to commence supporting the reception, staging, onward movement phase for the force. We have already stated that all actors involved have a collective responsibility to ensure that the operational plan can be implemented with the necessary and sufficient logistics. During the operational planning, the J4, supported by the Joint Logistic Support Group, plays an important role in assessing whether the operational plan is feasible in relation to the available logistic resources. This picture visualizes the responsibility and the role of the various actors to ensure that the operational plan can be supported logistically. This slide describes the delineation of logistic responsibilities between Joint Task Force and the Joint Logistic Support Group. Both organizations' logistic responsibilities complement each other and cover the total logistics responsibility in an operation. The Joint Task Force is responsible for developing the logistic concept and plan, determine logistic requirements, set operation logistic priorities, and monitoring logistic plans and operation. The Joint Logistic Support Group commands assigned theater-level logistic resources and execute the Joint Task Force Headquarters logistic plan. There are many benefits for using Joint Logistic Support Group in a NATO operation. This slide lists the main three benefits: economy of scale and the optimized logistic footprint. Operational efficiency will strengthen the supply chain, and the Joint Logistic Support Group removes theater-level logistic burden from the component commands. We have in this presentation introduced you to the Joint Logistic Support Group. Key takeaway: the Joint Logistic Support Group is a scalable, deployable, executive, in-theater, operational level logistic organization. The Joint Logistic Support Group is an executor of theater-level multinational logistic support using assigned national, host nation support or commercial resources. The main purpose for the Joint Logistic Support Group is to enable greater cooperation in the logistics across NATO, optimize the logistic footprints for any given NATO operation, and reduce the overall expenses of logistics to a NATO and the contributing nations. Thank you for following this presentation.